Hi, Francisco talking from Aveiro. So, Russia just bombed one of the largest pediatric hospitals in Europe, in Ukraine, of course. They killed dozens of people, including children, including medical staff. It, it is part of one of the largest missile strikes since for the last months or so. The Russians launched dozens of missiles, many were intercepted, but a great amount of them did fall in targets. Mostly civilian targets like the hospital, the energy transformations and production sites. A few did fall in military installations, but that is a minority, and probably just some random strikes to include in the larger terror strike that was the main missile strike. So this is clearly a crime. This is clearly one of the most horrid things Russia has been doing. It's also only just part of a larger list. Unfortunately, because the Ukrainians are not folding, they are defending their land, they are doing their utmost to stop the Russian invasion. The Russians are resorting to one of their favorite tactics, which is to try to terrify the population into submission. Now, a lot can be said about the value of terror strikes and strategic bombardment. The Allies did try this, and the Germans in the Second World War. Oh, almost fall over there. In the Second World War, the results are mixed. In the Second World War, the Allies did manage to destroy several factories, which had results in the progression of the war. However, both the German and the Allied attempts at folding the population's will to fight failed miserably. What happened was that people just got really mad about what's being done to them, and they just kept fighting. The will to fight simply got bolder. It seems to be what is happening in Ukraine, where each strike to an hospital, to a school, only makes people more enraged, more willing to fight. However, that won't stop the Russians from trying. They did manage to fold populations before in Syria and in Chechnya. That's how they fought those wars, actually. Like Chechnya was a case of to make a population submit by the threat of extermination. They invaded Chechnya once in middle 90s. It was an abject failure, which caused incredible loss to the Russians. And then they tried again, already under Vladimir Putin, and they did destroy the Chechens' will to fight by simply killing as many civilians as possible. In Syria, their strategy to support the government forces against the rebels also involved the destruction of as many civilian targets as they could possibly find. There was like a comment that I saw at the start of the full-on invasion of Ukraine, where during the siege of Mariupol, a lot of schools and hideouts for civilians were destroyed, and at the time the Ukrainians did write like school, hospital in front of the locations, and then they were promptly attacked. And veterans from the Syrian war warned the Ukrainians that they shouldn't do that, because informing the Russians that there will be a civilian there will simply prompt an attack. Because the idea of the Russians is, you will be afraid, you will fold through sheer terror. And that's what they're trying to do in Ukraine. Like, they have been advancing, as I told in the prior video, but their advances are really slow, really grinding, and really costly. Now you can say, oh, it doesn't matter, the Russians have a lot of volunteers, a lot of soldiers, either by forced conscription in Russia or by volunteers from other countries that are willing to risk their lives for some payment. And they have a lot of stockpiles from the Cold War that they can just spend until they waste the Ukrainians. That is a yes no. Like, they have a lot of people that are willing to sacrifice for their campaign, but that number is not infinite. And one thing that you may notice is that recently the Russian government kinda blocked the internet in Russia. And why did they do this? Because they are afraid that people might start to get informed, and by being informed they will realize what's going on and stop volunteering for the war. And the same goes from people outside Russia. Also, the amount of vehicles they can spend in the way they've been spending is growing really short. People have been analyzing the amount of vehicles available to the Russians, and it seems that the numbers that were given prior to the war were actually too large, and at least the numbers of available vehicles, like not the ones they have in general, but the ones they can actually use. And it is expected that by this time next year or early 2026, Russians will have no vehicles to use in the war, at least not in a valuable number. That's why they've been using a lot of cycles, golf carts, and that kind of really small, almost useless vehicles to transport troops. I mean, they've been using the electrical pads to move around because they don't have enough cycles. So there's obviously a lack of equipment, and people have been talking about a shortage of troops because they've been just spending them at will, and they're starting to get low on recruits. So if this is true, that will also explain why the Russians are investing more in these terror strikes, because they really need the Ukrainians to fold as soon as possible, or they will be in the hard place and the rock that is Ukraine. We shall see, but for now expect more of these strikes. Don't be surprised to see Russians attacking hospitals and schools. They've been doing since the start. They will keep doing it until Ukraine wins. That's the sad truth of this war.